So not even 24 hours ago, I released episode number 113 of The Neutral Corner. And in that episode, it was over an hour long. I talked about all kinds of boxing news, but there was a portion of it, maybe 10 minutes or less, where I talked about the Canelo Alvarez situation. Testing positive twice in two separate tests now, we know, on February 17th and February 20th for trace elements of clenbuterol, which is, of course, on the prohibited list set by WADA. And I tried to present the facts that I knew at that time, which were very, very limited. Not that we have that much information right now, but we have a little bit more. In a moderate way, without taking one side or the other. It's simply stating the facts of the case, the realities, and what I think was going to happen, which I still believe the fight's still going to go on May 5th between Canelo Alvarez and Gennady Golovkin and all of that. So predictably, a bunch of you jumped down my throat. Now I'm being called everything from a Canelo apologist to a Golovkin hater, a sellout, all this other stuff, which, you know, that just comes with the territory. I'm used to it. Pretty much every week I'm being called a shill for this promoter or that promoter, and now I'm being called a shill for Golden Boy Promotions, even though I was the guy banging the hell out of the drums after the controversy, scoring controversy after the first fight. And the guys at Golden Boy Promotions who ran that show really didn't like me, and there were repercussions for that. Related to this rematch and some of the productions and stuff that they were doing that I may have been a part of. If they weren't so unhappy with me, who knows? But I've been highly critical of Canelo Alvarez and the catch weights, the Canelo weights. I've been highly critical of Golden Boy Promotions and some of the moves and stunts that they've pulled, the way they handled the whole WBC situation with first Miguel Cotto and then Gennady Golovkin, and when he was stripped. Guys, if you go back and you look at my track record, I've been just as critical of Golden Boy Promotions as anybody else. The last thing I am is a shill for them. But predictably, people don't listen to the entire thing I have to say. They don't go back and look at the track record. They get sent one video. They don't even know that I'm a journalist and a writer. They just think I'm a YouTube guy. And they go nuts slaughtering me in the comments section and making videos about me and everything else. So look, I just want to make a quick rant video to talk about some of this stuff and to double down and explain to you guys my position. My position right now is that there's not enough information to have a goddamn position. We are in the beginning stages of this, right? I talked before in the episode of The Neutral Corner about needing more information to proceed into. We're never going to know the full truth, because we don't know what these guys are doing. Even if you do full VADA panel testing during a fight camp, we don't know what you're doing before the fight camp. And it is very possible that Canelo Alvarez could have been using clenbuterol purposefully and phasing, cycling off of it, the half-life cycle, all that. And at the beginning of camp, there are still trace elements in his system, and VADA caught it. It is very possible. It is also possible, though, it is also within the realm of possibility that he ate meat that was contaminated. And there is a precedent for that, particularly in Mexico, also in China, in some other parts of the world. So there are two different possibilities there. It is not my job to tell you which possibility I think is true. It is my job to present the information, and you can decide what you want to believe. Once I have more information, perhaps I will give you a viewpoint. Now, some of you made the point to compare my reporting on this Canelo Alvarez thing to my reporting on Floyd Mayweather and IV Gate, right? And that goes back several years. But to compare those two situations, you have to be a mongoloid. You have to be a moron, because it's completely different. Going back to the IV Gate situation, and I'm not going to go over every damn detail. Go back and find the information yourself. Do the damn work. If you don't want to do the research online with Google and reading all that, find my video. I explain it all right there. But this guy was caught using an IV that is against the rules the day before the biggest fight in modern boxing history, the biggest sporting event of 2015, and the biggest fight of both his and Manny Pacquiao's career. That is enough to be suspicious, right? but also he had had urine tests before, Floyd Mayweather, that came back with a low TE ratio, not once, but twice. That is a dead giveaway, a red flag for doping. And we've seen cases of that multiple times in multiple sports in multiple countries and commissions around the world. And nothing was ever done about it by the Nevada State Athletic Commission, which has a very cozy relationship with Floyd and still does. So there was a sequence of events going back years related to Floyd that weren't necessarily related to IV-gate, but because there was a sequence of related events in terms of being against the rules, being red flags for doping, they were related in that respect. And that is a very complex situation that goes back years. And there's a history and a sequence of events. With Canelo Alvarez, all we have at this point, all we know, is that the guy's never failed a drug test before. He's had dozens of drug tests administered from various jurisdictions, but most recently VADA, right? And he's never failed one prior to just now. There was two samples collected, one on February 17th, one on February 20th. And those came back positive. That's all we know. We don't know anything else. And for anyone else to say, well, this means he's doping, or this means he's not doping, 100%, with certainty, either way, is intellectually irresponsible. Also, to compare what we know about this Canelo situation right now as it stands to the Alexander Povetkin situation, or to the Lucas Brown situation, or even to the Luis Ortiz situation, or Floyd Mayweather and IV-gate, or any other situation involving any other boxer or any other athlete in any other sport, is intellectually dishonest. It is not legitimate. A lot of you have an issue with me because I just won't jump in and say Canelo Alvarez is dirty. Well, I wouldn't be doing my job if I just dove in and did that right now. Again, we don't have enough information. We don't have a sequence of events. We don't have a history here. It's absolutely different than even Alexander Povetkin. Now, when I say we need more information, what are some of the things I'm talking about? Okay. For starters, I will go back to sequence of events. These two tests collected, these two samples collected by VADA, February 17th, February 20th, were they the first samples they collected in camp? Were those the first tests administered? Or had there been prior tests that came back negative? When you have several negative tests and then several positive tests, that is a massive red flag, right? Now, it could mean a couple different things, but we've had situations like that in the past with other fighters recently where they tested positive. And I'm not going to get into all these other fighters. Guys have done videos on all these other guys. Just go look and find it. You're also being manipulated by a lot of channels and blogs and fan pages and stuff about some of these prior cases. They're not telling you the whole story. They're not telling you all of the nuance. And this is a word I will continue to go to because nuance matters. And for some reason, a lot of people these days in our society are incapable of nuance. And all of these cases have lots of nuance. All right? So that's the first thing we need from Canelo. Also, if there was contaminated meat, is there a team chef, a team cook, or something like that that was preparing the meals? If so, do they have any information about a grocer where they were buying their food, or a particular restaurant, a particular butcher? Did they go hunting and catch food? If they bought, let's say they bought a whole damn pig or a whole damn cow or something, right, and brought it back to camp and used that to cook and eat for a week, that would explain tests that came back positive a few days apart. It wouldn't explain if there were tests also done. Let's say there was a test done February 18th, February 19th, and we don't know about that. We don't know because we don't know the sequence of events. There was a clean, or I should say negative test in between the two positive tests. Well, that surely would indicate possibly microdosing or something like that. So that matters, okay? Was Canelo Alvarez using any supplements? Now, anytime you fill out one of those testing forms before you give a sample, you're supposed to give any medications you're taking, any supplements you're taking. Luis Ortiz learned that lesson the hard way recently, right? So maybe there's a supplement that was ingested. and that could be leading to something. Who knows? Okay, I'm just spitballing here, brainstorming. If that was the case, do we have financial records showing where that was purchased? If it was purchased from a lab or purchased from a store or something, do we have financial records? Do we have receipts? Going back to the meat situation, if there was a team chef or something like that, and meat was purchased from a butcher or a grocer, are there financial records there? Are there receipts there that could be presented, right? So there's a lot of information that might be available that we just don't know about yet. We just don't know, guys. So you have to be patient and wait for the process to play out, okay? And there's more information that can be had. So we just don't know yet. And that's why I'm saying at this point, we can't just jump in and say, dude's juicing, guilty as hell. That's it. You're not going to hear that from me. And no, I didn't do that with Alexander Povetkin. I didn't do that with Floyd Mayweather. There was plenty of information we had, and there was a sequence of events, history, that we knew some of these guys were testing and multiple times throughout a camp, and the test would come back negative, and then suddenly there were multiple tests that came back positive. Things like that shouldn't happen. Also, at what phase during camp the test comes back, that kind of indicates things too. You have guys who throughout camp are testing negative, and then the week of the fight, boom, they're popping positive on test for something. That indicates that you might be prepping a little something extra for that fight. There's all kinds of things, guys. It's like I said, very nuanced and detailed, and we just got to sit tight and wait to see what comes from this investigation. The Nevada State Athletic Commission will have a hearing. We got to see how they're going to handle this. Obviously, there was controversy with some of the ways they handled the first fight, so everyone's going to be looking very, very closely at the way they handle the second fight, including me, and I will report on things accordingly as information comes out. I say all that, and I add this: I don't blame any of you for being suspicious of Canelo Alvarez or any other fighter or any other athlete in any other sport right now. I don't blame you. And yes, there's some circumstantial evidence, and it causes red flags. I understand that. People will look at Canelo Alvarez. There's two groups of people that look at him right now, and they see two different things, okay? Well, they see the same thing two different ways. Some people will look at a guy who looks physically bigger, stronger, more ripped than he's ever looked before. I know when I saw him last week at the press conference here in Los Angeles, he looked bigger. He looked visibly bigger than I've seen him look before. Was it the red beard? Was it the big jacket with the shoulder pads he had on? Was it, the shoes that had extra big heels? I don't know. But I noticed he looked bigger. So there are some people that will look at that and say, that means he's juicing. That means he's using steroids. That means he's using performance-enhancing drugs. There's another group of people who will look at him and say, we can't prove that. He's 27 years old. He used to kill himself to make an unnatural weight, and now he's able to eat more and he's bulking up. I know when I was in my late 20s and early 30s and I was an athlete, I continued to put on muscle and bulk up. So there's two different people that would look at that two different ways. I'm not telling you which way I'm looking at it right now. That's not my job, okay? I'm telling you guys the information. I can say that, I understand both points of view. I really, really, truly do. And I can't tell you which one's right. But for those of you trying to compare that situation to Floyd Mayweather and the IV gate thing, again, you're being dishonest because Floyd Mayweather wasn't 27 years old. He wasn't moving up in weight. He was much older than Canelo Alvarez is now, fully grown. And all of a sudden, he looked bigger and more ripped, more plump than ever before. Almost overnight. And we saw the same thing with Juan Manuel Marquez in that fourth fight with Manny Pacquiao. Only trained in Mexico. Refused to train up here. No VADA testing for that fight. I don't even know if VADA, I think VADA existed, but it was in its infancy. No hard, stringent drug testing for that fight. Could never hurt Pacquiao in 36 rounds of action, even though he nailed him with a lot of counter shots. Suddenly he's dropping the guy and then knocking him out later in the fight. Acme all over his back. All that is, they're all red flags, but none of it is proof. That matters. a guy might look like he's guilty. There might be a lot of red flags, but you don't have proof. Now, with this Canelo situation, as it relates to clenbuterol, this isn't the first time an athlete, particularly a fighter from Mexico, has blamed clenbuterol, testing positive for clenbuterol on contaminated meat. Not the first time it's happened. And a lot of people are saying, and they're saying rightfully so, correctly so, that there is legitimacy to the contaminated meat situation in Mexico and in other countries. However, dirty athletes can see that as a loophole, an opportunity to exploit. They can use clenbuterol and say, hey man, it was just in the tainted meat, right? Or you could eat wild boar if you're Tyson Fury and say, oh, hey, I tested positive for something. It was in this wild boar I ate. Did he ever provide any evidence? Did Tyson Fury ever provide any evidence of this wild boar he consumed? A lot of you guys supporting Tyson Fury and hanging that win he has against Vladimir Klitschko is this monumental achievement and really forgiving him for all his transgressions. You weren't demanding any proof or receipts of this wild boar he ate. I guess you can't have a receipt for a wild boar, but if you went on a hunting expedition or something like that, like just provide more information. We just ate a wild boar. That's why we tested dirty. Both me and my cousin. Like, the inconsistency here, and again, I don't know enough about the Tyson Fury situation. I wasn't there. Did he really consume wild boar? Or is that just an excuse? The way UCAD handled that situation with Tyson Fury is so jacked up. The authorities over in the UK, all of them, the way that entire situation was handled going back several years made the Nevada State Athletic Commission look like the gold standard of consistency and high marks. That's how poorly they handled that situation. So there's a bunch of these situations, guys, and we can't just, with a broad brush, paint them all the same way. Let's step back for a second. Let's get all the information about Canelo. But in the meantime, the sanctioning organizations, the commissions, they need to find some sort of unified, uniform, standard protocol for how they're going to handle these clenbuterol situations. And it might be that there's a window for maybe the rest of 2018 or something that they're going to maybe allow this contaminated meat excuse to fly. But at a certain date, they got to say, look, contaminated meat or not, you test positive for this, you're suspended. That's it. Because it's a prohibited substance. It's banned. My issue with the commissions, sanctioning organizations, all of them, is they are inconsistent with the way they adjudicate these results. And it's a bad look when certain fighters seem to be treated differently than others, particularly stars seem to be treated differently than others. And I understand you guys and your frustration with that. I totally understand. A lot of times you guys don't have all the information and you're being told by some fringe entities out there that there's a witch hunt against guys like Alexander Povetkin, and you're not being told all the details. But still, the way that situation was handled on the surface versus the way the situation with Canelo could be handled, we don't know how it's going to be handled because it hasn't played out yet, but we can all guess and assume how it's probably going to be handled. I can understand why a lot of fans out there would be a little upset and see and feel that it's two different standards of treatment. I get that. So I do think that it is it really is a crisis situation, I think, with these testing authorities. They're just doing their thing. These guys all test positive with VADA, right? They're just doing their job. They're popping them left and right. USADA's not catching these guys at the same rate. Neither is UCAD. It's VADA. There's a gold standard there. They're just doing their job. They're just doing what's being asked of them. It is up to the Nevada State Athletic Commission, the promoters, and really the sanctioning organizations to determine what they're going to do about clenbuterol, what they're going to do about meldonium. There's several of these banned, prohibited substances that a lot of people are even saying shouldn't even be banned. And there's legitimate people, actual scientists saying, I don't think this substance should be banned. There's a lot of controversy and disagreements, differing opinions on even what should be on the list. But if something is on the prohibited list and a fighter tests positive for it, What are you going to do? You can only allow these contaminated meat excuses so many times. Even if this is contaminated meat, and again, there's a possibility it was. I'm not saying it was. I'm not defending Canelo. I'm not being a Canelo fanboy. Believe me, I've never been accused of that before. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, it was contaminated meat. I don't give a shit. You know that you live in a country where there's contaminated meat. You know that if you test positive for this substance, you're going to be suspended for 6 months. So guess what? If you're Canelo Alvarez and you choose to live in Mexico, you check thoroughly with everything. Wherever you go out to eat, whatever restaurant, whoever's doing your cooking, where are they buying their meat? You check all of that stuff and you mark it down. You write everything down. You keep receipts, almost to a paranoia kind of level, to ensure that you don't test positive for anything. Now, if a fighter who's making $10,000 a fight can't afford to do that, so I might be a little more lenient with them. But if you are making 8-figure paydays every time you fight, which Canelo Alvarez has for a while now, you can afford to do this. And there really is no excuse. Just like there is no excuse for Luis Ortiz to not disclose he was taking blood pressure medication on a testing form. So look, a lot of you feel that Luis Ortiz got a raw deal, but the fact of the matter is he didn't disclose the medication he was taking. And in the end, he still got the damn fight he wanted with Deontay Wilder. He still got that payday. We're going to see the same thing here probably with Canelo Alvarez. My prediction, what I think is going to happen, Nevada State Athletic Commission is going to say, VADA's going to test you umpteen more times. If you test positive again, the sanctioning organizations will say, if you test positive again, you're suspended indefinitely, which is what they did with other fighters like Povetkin and such. And the fight will still go on, because I think regardless if it was tainted meat or if Canelo Alvarez was cycling on and off of something during the few months of time between the first Golovkin fight and the camp for this one, and it faded out, right? It did its half-life cycle, and there was traces left, and he got caught with a little bit in the system at the very beginning of camp. It's out now, and the rest of the camp, he's going to be quote-unquote clean. He's going to come back negative. So regardless, that's what's going to happen here. What I want to come out of all of this is for the sanctioning organizations and the commissions to determine some sort of uniform protocol to handle these situations, because I'm sick of the tainted meat excuses. That needs to be rectified somehow. That's my opinion. And I'm taking a stand, a stance on that, because I have a position on that. That needs to be rectified. Everything else, guys, is still up in the air. We don't have enough information. So go ahead and call me a sellout. Go ahead and call me a Canelo defender. A couple weeks from now, you'll be saying I'm a shill for some other promoter and I'm defending somebody else, because that's what some of you guys do. For those of you who understand the process and appreciate what I'm trying to do here, thank you very much for your support. Thank you for your consistent support. Even if we don't always agree fundamentally in how we see things, I think you guys can appreciate me for at least trying to be objective about it and get all the information before I report. That doesn't mean I don't make mistakes, but you guys know that I'm trying to do things in an honest and consistent way. And I know that you are subscribers, followers, listeners in an honest, consistent way, and you support my channel and you support what I'm doing. So I thank you very much for that. All right, that's it. Rant over.